I had a near-death experience in 1994. I was a fireman. That was my career. I'm retired now. But in 94, we were doing our normal thing, running calls, and it was kind of an abnormal flu season. But what happened was I was working on a paramedic engine I drove, and we went to, we were going to 3 or 4 a day of people who have been overcome by this flu. And this lady we came to her apartment, and her neighbors were outside, and they're like, we haven't seen her for days. And all the, details, the mail was stacking up, the newspapers, the car was there. And so we kicked the door in, fireman style, and found her in the back, and she was circling the drain. And we jumped into action doing, the thing with all the stuff you do. And I was putting a mask on her, an oxygen mask. And, as I was adjusting it and stuff, she exhaled because she, became conscious all of a sudden, and she saw all his help around her, and she exhaled. She was really happy. And I took her hot breath right into my lungs, just a full dose. And it was like, oh man, this is not a good sign. This woman is so ill. And we got her to the hospital, and she came home in a week or so. Wonderful success story. But within a couple of days, I started getting sick within 12 hours. And then by within 2 days, I was really super dehydrated because I was throwing up and I couldn't keep anything down, and everything was just, evacuating. And I just became, it was hard to stand up and get out of bed, and I wasn't myself at all. My vital signs, when I noticed my vital signs were all upside down, that's when I said, oh, I'm now, I need an ambulance. And I called my family, and they figured out I couldn't even talk. It was just a whisper, and they figured out it was trouble. So they called 911, and I went to the hospital, and they gave me a few liters of fluids, and that really bounced me back, and I was feeling pretty good. That emergency room, that hospital was inundated with people, kids and stuff that were suffering from this flu, and they took the priority. Older people and kids took a priority. So I was in a room for a while, and they came in and they said, here, to hold you over, everyone in here is getting these same drugs. And they pushed it into the IV. And it was something for nausea and something for pain. And my system just, there was some things that didn't go right. But anyway, I keeled over. I just went straight back. And my wife was there. She started taking notes on what was going on, and she thought it was obviously serious. They were very concerned, and they came in and they gave me some drugs to wipe out the other, the pain drugs. And I wasn't coming back. And she said they tried everything and had you head down and started a second IV line. And she said the highest blood pressure she heard was 40/0, and it's pretty far gone. So they put me up in intensive care, and I was still chugging along. And in the morning they told me, what's your lifestyle? And I told them, I did Ironmans, and I did all this cycling and swimming and running every day. And they said, well, that's probably what saved you, because you were so low for so long. You were just hovering at this place where people usually can't hover. They leave. And so anyway, during that night, sometime during that night, I left my body, and I was instantly, the thing that I experienced was I was flying through what looked like space. It was a dark space in the background, and there were all these wonderful stars. That's all I could call them for years, was stars. They were these orbs, these colored balls, and they were just, I was just parading through them, and they were just showering me with these feelings of acceptance and love. And, it was coming in this flow of colors. It was coming like music, and I just was home. It was very obvious. I was not Bill. I was well aware that I was not Bill, and that I had been in this container, this character. Now I was back to whatever it is that we really are. And it was this huge expanded cloud of awareness flying through space with all these emotions. And my first thought was, man, what was that? Meaning this life, being in this world. And I've had a completely charmed life, wonderful life, haven't lacked anything. And still the transition, um, the comparison is amazing. How what our real existence is, just this sustained euphoria, just this ecstatic state. And every new moment was like, oh wow, this is so cool. Oh wow, this is so cool. And people say, oh, I don't want to live forever. But you do, because there is no past and present. You're always in the moment, and the moment is um, euphoric. Hope that helps with people who think it's a curse, because it's not. And a lot of our perception of future events and past traumas and stuff, they're just something that happens here that it doesn't go with us. In fact, none of those emotions go with us. Those lower vibe emotions that we have, things like sadness and regret and jealousy, those emotions stay here, and we're supposed to be learning to deal with them. That's kind of the universe is emotions. It's all about emotional quality, our choices and our thoughts. And, this place is getting rid of those low emotions, getting control of our minds, our thoughts, and choosing to be happy. And it's not easy. It's absolutely not easy here. So I was flying along, and I felt like I'd been released from a hot, dark, stuffy closet, like I'd been stuffed into Bill. And I wasn't Bill anymore. And another thought that was going through my head was, how in the world did I believe I was this person? It seemed like it was such an amazing, complete trick had been played on me, and I wasn't Bill anymore. I knew everything about him. I knew all of his history and his likes and dislikes and his personality, and I just wasn't him anymore. So I'm flying along, and I'm like, this is awesome. This is amazing. This is so cool. Nothing was impossible. Limitless environment, limitless love, and companionship with these orbs, these stars, these souls. I was absolutely stoked. And then all of a sudden, everything changed, and I was in this other place. And it was a solid place. It was like a clinic or a facility. And there had indirect lighting, and there were beds there, and there were, it was equipment. And right in front of me, there were these three short little hooded guys, and they were overjoyed to see me. They were giggling and bouncing around, and I was trying to get my wits about me, and very confused. All of a sudden, I'm in this place with these beings that we don't understand, and they were smiling, and they were asking me all these questions. They were asking me like, well, how was that? And what did you learn? What can you tell us? And I was real confused. I think I was just like looking at them, kind of smiling like, well, you guys are cute, but what's going on here? And one of them kind of bounced forward and looked me up and down. And then he turned to the other two and he goes, he doesn't remember us. And they all started giggling. And I wasn't fearful at all. I knew these guys were cool. I knew they were sweethearts, but I still hadn't figured out what was going on. And then there was this other guy, and he was in the background at first, but he came forward, and he was this tall, I call him the tall, wispy guy. And I've tried to explain him for years that it was like a stretched out Gumby or a walking stick insect, or, the biggest thing that's, I've gotten used to saying is that he looked like a water whirl. Like if you took a glass of water and stirred it really fast, and then you can see that ribbon of water, just that little slender dancing whirlpool. And he had this huge smile on his face, just exuberant. And he had these bright eyes. And as he came forward, the water whirl kind of, he would move and separate, and then it would catch up, the legs would catch up, or something like that. And he was this spinning energy. And as he came forward, as his energy got closer to me, and he obviously loved me, and I was absolutely stoked to see him. But as he came closer, that spinning energy kind of engulfed me, and my throat just clamped down, and my chest was expanding, and I felt like I was going to break down, to fall down to my knees and break down crying uncontrollably, sobbing from love. There's so much love coming from this higher being that it was overwhelming. It was paralyzing. And he had this really cool laugh. He was just chuckling. And, every time I thought something, then it was out there. You were speaking that way. Everything is, and that's another thing why people enjoy, like the character Forrest Gump, everyone fell in love with him because he was absolutely genuine and authentic. And that is what the other side is. You don't have an opportunity to collect your thoughts and then think, well, how can I best say this, to benefit myself or something. If you think it comes out, and it's all genuine and authentic. And we love that. Our friends are authentic people, and that's why they're our friends, because you know who they are. And so the two little guys were giggling, and they were bouncing around. They were playing tricks on each other. It was like the Three Stooges, and they were just giggling the whole time. And then he was chuckling at them, and then every time I had something to say, he was chuckling at me, and I could feel his laugh inside of me. And so this went on for a while, and it wasn't very organized. It didn't seem like they had a program. And so I piped up, and I'm like, well, our life is supposed to flash before our eyes when we die. I absolutely knew I wasn't Bill, and I had died. I absolutely knew that. And so our life flashes before our eyes, or we have we look back on our lives, or we have a life review. Or you guys want to get started with that? And that just cracked him up. He laughed, had this belly laugh. And when he stopped chuckling, he said, sure, let's do that. How do you want to start? And, I said, okay, cool. And so I just started telling stories about my life. And it wasn't a review of my life. I wasn't looking back at people I'd hurt or harmed, or my words, what they had done, I didn't see any of that. It was just me telling stories, and I told a few stories, and after a while, nobody was listening. They didn't care. I was just babbling, and after a while, he stepped forward. He goes, okay, that's enough. Time to go back. That was the last thing that was on my mind, that would happen. And I was like, what, dude, what? I'm not going back there. You got to be kidding me. And he says, no, you got to go back. You got things to do, and they're important. And the three little guys, it was like their job was over. It was like a show and tell, and the show was over, and it's like they were reassigned. They went somewhere else in that facility. And then he stepped forward, and I told I had all these excuses. I said, I can't go back there. There's no way. I won't be missed, and all these stories. And I was almost 40. I was in my 30s. I said, I'm almost 40. I'm pretty much done for. I don't have much more to contribute. And he laughed at all of my excuses. And then he says, okay, come on. it's time to go back, and you got things to do. And so as he stepped forward, it was obvious that that it was over, and there was nothing more to be said. And you just wasn't fighting it anymore. And with his intention, with his will, that spinning energy, the room just broke up. It just started to come apart like you'd see in a sci-fi movie. And he kind of evaporated in front of me, just sort of came apart like mist. And then I dropped away. It was a definite dropping feeling, a drop in frequency, a drop in vibration. And I fell away into darkness. And when I got down near my body, I knew I was right near my body. I was in this place. I've never shied away from this, even though some people it harms, it creates fear. But before I got it back in my body, I was in this other place, and it was lonely and dismal, and it did not have a good feel to it. I don't know if it's reintegrating with Bill, with his energy, the traumas that he carried, or that, right next to us is, a lower vibration. They call it the lower astral. Some people call it hell, where when we leave our bodies, when our life's over, if we haven't sorted out a few things, we kind of stumble around in there. That's right out of the scripture, the valley of the shadow of death. And that place is a lonely, dismal place, and you have to come at it. You have to get control of your thoughts in order to pull out of that place, because we all have a divine home of complete euphoria, but we get confused when we're here in these many lives. So then I was back in my body, and I woke up, and I was looking at the numbers on the machines that were hooked up to me, and I noticed that vital signs were improving with time. I kept waking up and going to sleep. And then a nurse came by in the dark, and she's making her rounds, and she saw that I was awake, and she was like startled. She's like, you're awake? And I'm like, yes, ma'am, I am. I need to have a talk with you. And she said, I need to go get the doctor. And, we didn't know what was going on with you, why you were so far gone. And that's like, okay, yeah, you can go get the doctor. And, but first, what am I doing back here? And I mean, that was the most honest statement I could ever make. It was like, I was so disappointed. And I said, I was home. I was home with my best bros, and it was heaven. And how did I get back here? I had died. I had bought the farm. And without missing a beat, she was a funny, clever old nurse. Without missing a beat, she goes, honey, you were in escrow, and you fell out of escrow, and now you're back with us, and you need to get your head around it. And she was, she had her hands on my shoulders, and she's looking me right in the eye. And that was a really wonderful gift, because she grounded me. Here I'd been, this eternal soul, and I knew what was out there. And she said, okay, you're back with us, and you need to get your head around that. And that was good, because, I was sad, very sad for a few days after that. But I came out of it, and I think it was because of that. I've never forgot that statement. It was very wise words. The doctors came, and I'm just like, blah, 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 blah. I'm telling them all about, I didn't hold back on any of this. And I told them all about these little guys, and they were sweethearts, and how much they loved me, and how funny they were. And then the tall, wispy guy. And, it's so, you have no idea what this is. We are in a pretend world here, and we go back to this joyful, honest, authentic, wonderful existence that we can't understand. And they all said I was a kook, and then my family was there, and after a while, and I kept it up, and you could see the disappointment in their eyes, thinking that I had brain damage. And so I learned to let up on them, because they couldn't process it at all. And when I got back to work, I was on the couch for a week or so. And when I got back to work, all the fire guys are like, "Hey, dude, what happened in the hospital? Everyone's talking about this thing." And I'm like, "Well, sit down. I'll tell you." And I would tell the whole story, just like I told you. And after a couple of weeks, that story went everywhere. And after a couple of weeks, one of the guys in the office came by, just a routine thing, and he said, "Hey, by the way, they're talking about you in the chief's office. That you're, a lunatic, and you may want to put that story away." And I'm like, "Yeah, I get it." I wasn't, offended at all. It's like, yeah, I'm living in this world where we don't understand these things in these times, and we don't understand who we really are. And so I zipped it, and I dummied up for 15 years, and I knew it was true. I didn't dismiss it. I didn't have any issue with it. I didn't react to the situation that, we really don't know who we are. And I just continued my life just like that. And I figured these things will turn around in time, and, we'll go back to what our ancient ancestors knew about this place, the magic of this place. And then, some years went by, a couple of years went by after I retired. And then I had this whole thing with, Rick Strassman's work with DMT and his volunteers who he was sending into another dimension with this DMT. And they were seeing the same three little guys and the taller guy. He had 400 volunteers, and mostly it was that they were in this like facility, this clinic, and that kind of rocked my boat, because it's like, okay, that was my experience. I wasn't being injected with DMT. I was out of my body in some other realm, dimension, and I was this huge expanded being. But Straussman could do that with this DMT. And what he is doing is mimicking the action of the pineal gland, where, it's DMT is a big part of our life when we sleep and when we soul travel. And then when we die, we get a massive dose, splashes the brain. And that's what he was doing in his experiments. And that rockets the soul out of the body and into these other realms that are all around us. And, these little guys, they are bouncing between our ability to perceive them. They kind of keep this place in order. They're all around all of us. And in ancient times, our ancestors weren't a bunch of goofballs. They had names for them. They called them leprechauns and elves and gnomes. So that's kind of where I've gotten to. And then, you and I talked earlier, when the big guy told me, the tall wispy guy told me, you have things to do, they're important. And, for a lot of years, it wasn't really understood. It was about 8 years ago I started talking about this at IONS meetings. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, this whole COVID thing, these podcasts, and, we're living in amazing times where there's hundreds, thousands of people coming forward who have these experiences where they experience themselves outside of their human personality. This is the world waking up. We've all heard this, but the world is waking up to what we really are. And it's just beginning. And people like you and me, we're just planting the seeds, for the next group. And eventually the majority of humanity will know these things. We'll conduct ourselves, with love and kindness and compassion towards each other. And that's where the world's going. So that's my story. I hope it didn't go on too long.
Well, almost everybody heard your story, so we're just going to go with some questions. You said that humanity is waking up right now. What do you mean by that? And when humanity started to wake up, in your opinion?
Well, there's this group called the Conference on Precession and Ancient Knowledge. And I don't go to a lot of conferences, but I ended up at theirs because, I spent this time where I was around shamans and Native Americans and ancient ways. And, the shamanic culture is a leftover intelligence from those ancient times. And these are the things that the Egyptians and Mayans, Incas, they knew that this world was is different from what we think it is. Most of us, what we think it is. So with this thing, there's a precession of the equinox. It's a 24,000-year cycle, and it cycles continuously. The Hindus call it yugas, and you go through a golden age and a silver age and a bronze age and an iron age. And 10,000 years ago, we hear these myths about Atlantis and Egypt and Mesoamerica. These are leftovers from the Atlantis time, where that was a global culture. And it's all considered myth and stuff, but I think it's true. That's exactly what it was. That was the golden age. And, Atlantis had to go 10,000 years ago because we were going to sink back down silver, bronze, iron age, to where these really strong negative emotions rule the earth plane. And, this is this thing with wars and everything we're seeing. And in 2012, that wasn't the end of the world. The Mayans said that it was the beginning of a new type of human, a human that could integrate the energy that's coming back into the earth plane, this awakening, this realization of what we really are. The NDEers, that this is the out-of-body people, and a lot of these people having these spiritual transformative incidents in their life. This is a lot of what this is this energy that's coming in, and when we support it, when we eat food full of light, and we structure our water, and we structure our lives around being close to the earth, then this energy comes in and we work with it. But if we don't, it can become, it makes people crazy. So that's what I think. I think it's this precession of the equinox, this 24,000-year cycle. We bottomed out at 2012, and then we started to climb back. And, right now, this time that we're in, this is known as the Age of Heroes. These people that are coming forward and trying to enlighten people, like yourself, Sergey. And
Thank you. How many podcasts you've been to? Probably at least 100, right?
Yeah, it's there's a lot. I've given a lot of these interviews, dozens, and then a lot of people, take these interviews and then they make their own interview out of it, and
Yeah.
And it's all cool. There's all kinds of opinions out there, so
Yeah.
it's all cool. I don't mind at all.
Yes. My question is this: you see, I read my comments for my videos too, and a lot of people are they have objections about why he or she never mentioned Jesus. Why you didn't see Jesus? Jesus is the only one who's gonna save you, and you didn't see Jesus. And from your story, I didn't hear you saying Jesus. So I would like to hear the explanation why some people see Jesus, but a lot of people I interviewed, there was only one lady that was really, really powerful about Jesus. Really great story. That was an amazing story. But other than that, not too many mention Jesus. So what's your take on that?
Well, my take on that is that the people that are speaking up about their experience, they're being completely honest. And if they didn't see Jesus and it wasn't in their experience, then nobody introduced themselves as Jesus. Nobody had a name tag. But when people write to me and they say, "You saw Jesus," and I say, "Yeah, I think you're right." And somebody from your neck of the woods will say, "You saw Lord Krishna," and I'd say, "Yeah, I think you're right." And the Hindus, they have this guy, they call him the Cheerful King, and he has these three little buffoons with him, and that's in their religious culture. They said some Native Americans have called me and said, you just told me everything my grandfather told me growing up on the reservation of what happens in the next world, that there are these three jovial people, and then there's this wonderful being that is full of love. So I didn't really plan it this way. I wasn't trying to discount anybody. All I wanted to do was, I was a fire captain, and every time we went to an incident, we had to write up an incident report, and it was just the facts. And so I've just been telling my story with what I experienced, and just being completely honest. And I think that people, wherever they are in their spiritual growth, this is soul growth. This is what's going on. We have thousands of lives. And wherever we are, whatever we need to help us through an experience like that, that's what they experience. They see Jesus, or they see their Uncle Larry, or they see their mother. It's all the way down the line. And then eventually, I think you get to this thing that we are these higher beings. And, the things that Robert Edward Grant is saying, and what they're saying about these ancient beings, and, these multidimensional ancient beings that are incredibly kind and wise, and we're a part of them. These things start making sense. And people, religions, they're doing their best to tell this incredibly bizarre story about our situation here. And people are doing their best to understand their own situation, and bringing in their religions to help with that understanding. That's what I think.
So you think that people see what they expect to see when they get on the other side?
Yeah, I think that sums it up. Um, where they are in their spiritual growth, in their soul growth, how much comfort do they need to not completely freak out in the circumstances? Because it's we don't die. It's almost it is. It's a seamless, flawless transition. 1 minute you're here, and then 1 second you're here, and the next second nothing happens to you, but you're not in your body, and you're not the person you've been all your life. And Tom Campbell, he says that you're on the other side, you're trying to be processed to where you don't slip into a fit of uncertainty with your thoughts, because then your thoughts run away with fear, and then they've lost you, and you're not making a clean transition. Yeah, whatever you need to get you through the very bizarre experience of your consciousness leaving your body, and the realization that you weren't your body all this time.
So in human time, how long you were on the other side, and what was your perception? Did you feel that there was no time at all for you, or was your perception of you being on the other side?
Well, time wasn't really something that was around anymore. But people have asked me this, and I'd say in human terms, flying through the space, and then being in this facility, that it was a quick tour, and that it was probably 20 minutes, but that doesn't even feel right to say that. But yeah, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and if you need time associated with it, there it is.
Okay, so 20, 30 minutes you were dead, right? But on the other side, there was no time, so you don't know. You might be, for you on the other side, it might be 1,000 years. Who knows? If we want to put
Right.
it in, yeah.
I don't know.
It was one of those dumb questions. I'm going to ask you several, so but we'll edit that.
No, it's not. Sergey, it's really not a dumb question, because we are trapped in this time thing,
Yeah.
and it's part of taking on these bodies. This is a creation of the Creator. We've made these bodies. It's a gift, and these bodies have an expiration date. And this whole thing with time, it's kind of an artifact of this dimension we're in, this Earth experience. It's an artifact of it, and we think it's real, that there's time and distance and space, and none of those things are real.
Bill, tell me this. You said that you experimented with DMT, and then people who had experimented with DMT too, they say that they saw the same two little guys and the same tall guy. But my question is this. The near-death experiencers that I interviewed, they almost all of them tell a different story. Well, there is some similarity with the life review, with the tunnel, with flying, feeling love. But as far as imagery goes, the circumstances are a little bit different for everybody. But with the DMT, they have the same the same story. Two little guys and one tall guy. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's three little guys. And then a tall, wispy guy. Yeah, that's true. And so there's this movie. And you're a filmmaker, so talking about movies is going to be fun for you. But there's this movie called Communion, and historically it's considered a horror movie. But in that movie, Christopher Walken, he's having this experience of being abducted by aliens or something, and and he's fearful throughout most of the movie, and then he gets control of his fear, and at the end, he goes looking for this, this place that he's going, or this ship that he's going into. And if you notice, he walks into a light. He goes into a higher vibration, another dimension, and when he's there, those three little hooded guys that he's with, they look exactly like the guys I saw, exactly. And the only difference is they had big smiles on their face, and they're dancing around in there, and they're high-fiving him, and they're a bunch of jokers, and then in the background, there's this other guy, and he's this tall, kind of willowy, wispy guy. And we have all kinds of experiences. But when you're ready, there is, we are on this journey. We're souls that are being processed to be a higher quality, to have love and sweetness and kindness as our lead. And part of that processing is this. These guys that are looking out for us. We call them things like angels and guides and helpers, and and they're on the other side, and they have this appearance, and we've called them things like leprechauns and gnomes. But that's my take on it. And he gets control. Christopher Walken gets control of his fear, and it's a very, he's in this facility dancing with these guys and high-fiving them and laughing it up, and it's not a fearful experience. And I think that's what's going on. And I think that we're supposed to start growing up to the fact that yes, we have an earth life, and it is a gift. It is an absolute wonderful thing, but we are also walking hand in hand with our spiritual self, this highly developed, highly expanded, eternal being that is us. And when we drop the pretending to be this human being, we return to that consciousness. We return, it reintegrates with that being that is eternally us.
When this tall being told you that you have to come back, you didn't want to come back. You said, no, I don't want to come back. But how about the choice, the power of choice? We have the choice, right? So you couldn't exercise your power of choice at that moment. You had to come back, right?
I know that's popular now, this thing about making this your last life. But this thing about stepping forward and saying, I'm not going back, and I am a powerful soul. And I don't know about that stuff. It sounds like it's possible, but if you go to all the ancients, the Hindus and all these ancient religions, spirituality. The point is to realize who we are in this life, to come to the realization that we are, this current life is a temporary, and that we do return to this eternal life. And that's like this self-realization. This is the whole point of getting past the self. And we come to that, and it's through love and through understanding and compassion. Then our processing here is about done. We are a good enough soul, a high quality soul that is allowed to move around in the universe. That's what I think's going on.
Do you think that you had some unfinished business here? You had to come back so you can tell your story and help awaken more people? Maybe that was the purpose for you coming back.
Absolutely. Just like you, when we first started talking, you said, "Oh, you're a celebrity now, and you got all these things going." And it's like, well, I'm not a celebrity. That isn't anything that's I'm interested in. But absolutely, this is when he said very clearly, "You have to go back. You have things to do, and they're important." And what's happening right now, this is only 1%. This is only a fraction of 1% of the world population is listening to people like us. But it's the beginning. The light is coming back into the world, and it's not just me. You have a story as to why you're talking to people like me. And usually what you guys say, because I ask all of you, what you guys say is it's very important. It's coming from somewhere deep inside me that I am supposed to contribute to this mystery. And that's what's going on. It's like a fellowship of people that are being touched by the Creator.
Well, I'm gonna tell you something. When I first time came to Hollywood, I met some Christian group, Christian filmmakers, and there was a company. They were financed by Billy Graham organization. I forgot the name because it's been a long time ago. But this is where I got my first jobs, working with these guys. But then I say, Christian films are not interesting to me. I don't want to do that. And I wanted to do some gangsters movies. I want to do some that. That. Eventually, I came back to the spiritual again. I'm doing it right now on my own.
That's cool. Who is that on the back of that book? They looked familiar.
Well, this is Paramahansa Yogananda book. It's called Autobiography of a Yogi. A lot of people.
Cool.
Yeah, and his organization is called Self-Realization Fellowship. That's why I showed it to you, because it's called Self-Realization. He came here to America in 1920. He was one of the first, if not the first, Hindu guru to come and spread this yoga philosophy in the West.
That I absolutely know that that's my purpose. And when I go to these conferences and I talk, I say, you're going to get the common man's plain English version of spirituality. And you don't have to learn all these list of sacraments and know who these people are and all this stuff. It's really simple. You just have to bring that kindness and sweetness forward, and know that every living thing that you run into is also a divine soul having an experience here in this dimension, this hologram.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that we are all divine souls having this divine experience in this hologram. But you see how many people don't appreciate this. It's an immense amount of people, immense percentage of people, souls on this earth do not appreciate, including me before. Now I'm changing, but probably you had that too. Even though you probably had so much to be thankful for, you've still been complaining like everybody. We'll always find something to complain about.
Yeah, I was, this change happened to me in 60, as I was 60 years old, 61, and I'm almost 70 now. But my whole life, I was a rascal. I was a normal American a-hole. And people who I knew, like my wife, she said, "You are completely changed." And I'm like, is that okay? And she's like, yes, it's a huge upgrade. You've been changed for the better. And um, I'm not trying to put on any show or anything.
Yeah.
It's just really when you let go, really let go of this place and the character you're playing, um, and give some, some silence, some quiet time, some meditative, and then you can come back into knowing that who you really are.
Yeah, and you start noticing different things, like your attention shifts and you start noticing what's beneficial for you. You start noticing, okay, and the messages come to you. Let's say you're reading Facebook and only the messages that you need, they come to you. Everything that you don't need just kind of flies by. You don't register that. You register only what you focus. This is what your soul needs at this time for growth and for self-realization, like you said.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. You hear this term "know thyself." You see it in a lot of movies, like The Matrix and stuff. That was like a fundamental thing, know thyself. And I think I'll add my common man thing. It's like when we learn to get over thyself, um, then we can start to know thyself, and that is this self-realization.
So, Bill, you mentioned that for 15 years you didn't want to talk about this. First, you were talking about it, telling you were excited to tell everybody your story. You thought they can understand you, but people were in different vibration back then, and special that the ones that you were trying to tell this story. And you probably, like somebody advised you at work, say, "Hey, you know what? Shut up about this story because you might get locked up or something," right?
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to tell the story because I was filled up with that other side, with this knowing of what we all really are, and I wanted to share it with everybody I loved. And mostly we're not ready for that because when you really dive into it, that puts us, this self that we all believe we are, that puts that guy in the back seat, and nobody wants that. We're fully immersed in our character.
But what made you start telling the story 15 years later? Why you decided to come out of the spiritual closet and start telling the story?
Yeah, I like I said, after 2010, I was retired and I was pretty happy. And then I read Straussman's book, and that really got me going. This whole thing with DMT and ayahuasca. And so I started traveling. This went on for 3 or 4 years. I was traveling in Central America and around shamans and around Native Americans and around hippies, that were living, off the grid in Costa Rica. And things started to, when you get quiet and you change your diet and you drink water from a stream and you spend a lot of time in silence, and things start opening up, and I started having a lot of visions. People's faces would change in front of me, and I they weren't pictures, they were live beings that were coming forward on a person's face, like it was projected onto their face. And most of them were pretty happy, and some of them just wanted to talk. They're just talking a mile a minute. And like my friends, there's some of them down in Costa Rica. They would be like, "Okay, let's do this." Get in this low light with one candle and do this eye gazing thing, and then their past lives is all I could say that they were. Their past lives would come up on their faces, and there'd be a gentleman there, and he'd be trying to tell his life story. That was my friend, in the past. And I would walk right up to his face and talk to him. And, he didn't converse with me. He just was like talking nonstop. Like he was a confused soul, a confused past life. And some of them were incredibly happy and joyful, and some were stoic and silent. And they were just like pages of a book just coming up. And of course, auras around people and energies moving in the sky. All these things opened up, and I knew, okay, this is real. There's nothing to be afraid of.
So this person, this tall being, when he told you that you have to come back, and he said you have things to do, what do you think he meant by that? Things to do.
I'm doing them.
You're doing them right now. That's a good answer.
Doing them right, right now. This interview, because we think the world's all about global politics and economics, and that is not what the world's about. The world is about us coming in, having these experiences, and growing as souls. If you look at geology, these continents come up and they fall down, and they go, and things change, civilizations disappear. It's just a stage, and the stage, right now, the stage set is being reorganized, and these things take a couple of centuries, but the ways of humankind right now are disappearing, and we're going to go back to being close to nature and being cool. Politicians and all these people that are running the world now, lawyers. That's not a career for sweethearts. The simple man, just doing an honest work. Those are the heroes of the other side. Um, so yeah, those things are the energy is going to continue to increase to where we're only going to do good things. We're only going to be helpful and give to others. That's the future.
Yeah. One more interesting remark here. You said you felt drop in vibration. That was amazing. So when he told you you have things to do, go back, you felt this sudden drop in vibration.
Yeah, my near death experience, I believe, was a tour of the dimensions that are part of our experience here. I was on Earth, for all these years, 38 years at the time. And then I had this experience where I left my body, and then I was in this heavenly realm, where there were no downsides at all. And then I came back, then I changed, and I was at this sort of middle place, sort of this in between place, where I think we learn. We have many lives, and we learn, and our lives are continuously sort of kept on script. This is this in between place. And then I was back near my body, and I felt that low place, that valley of the shadow of death, that hell realm, that lower astral where the lower vibrations are. And then I was back in my, back in my body, back in my container. So yeah, and if you watch the movie Astral City, it's it came out of Brazil. It's this gentleman, his name is Chico Xavier. He was a very famous medium, and he wrote this book Astral City, and then there's a movie about it. And there is in that movie this follow this doctor as he dies and leaves his life, and this was all channeled, and he's in that hell realm for a time, and then he sorts it out, and he moves on to this healing place, this like medical facility. um, he's in this hospital bed, he's in this room where people are tending to him, and the eventual, through many lives, and the eventual thing is to graduate into this higher realm. And there's this guy, John Davis. He has this NDE where he goes to this place where there's all this higher learning, and this crystal city, so all this fits, and it's also it's in religion. It's we call it heaven and purgatory and earth and hell. Religions have kind of taken over the story, but with religious stories aside, this is a real thing. This is a real thing that's going on.
Yeah, because you mentioned here, you say, so you went from that heavenly place when he told you that you have to come back, you went right to hell, like you felt like you were in hell for a while, and then you went right into your body. Or you experienced coming back into your body as hell? Did you go to hell, or your coming back to your body was hell?
What I experienced was when I got near my body, I was in a lonely, heavy, dismal place. And what I've always said is that that is a place directly next to where we are in the physical. And I believe that as you know, as our we have many lives and the quality of our soul, um, vibration, continues to rise. We earn our wings. These stories have, we earn our wings. Our wings vibrate, and we rise up. And so if we have a high vibration when we leave our body, we don't get lost in that lower astral, that valley of shadow of death. We can navigate through there and move on.
Wow, this is really cool. So
I think
some
that's
people,
how it's all set up.
I think this is amazing. So a lot of people probably experience hell here on Earth when they lower their vibration too much, when they complain, when they are feeling too much down. The vibration slows, the vibration becoming lower, and they experience this realm of hell that you described. They can feel it here on this planet, probably, a lot of people.
Yeah, there's a kind of a formula there. If you're drinking a lot of alcohol, our whole experience here is through our eyes and our ears. It's through the central nervous system. That's the translator of our experience. And if people are drinking a lot, that's a central nervous system depressant. So the only vibration available to them is lower than be experienced if you didn't drink. And when you get into drug use, with these things like meth and some of these stronger opiates, those are crystals. Crystals are very powerful, and they're crushed into these crystalline white powders. But yeah, crystals, and science people have taken the vibration of these crystals, and it's extremely low. It's like barely off the scale. A crystal is like a living being. We can't really understand it, but it's like a living being. And when we take these into our bodies, we become that extremely low vibration living being that takes over us. So yeah.
Now, when you were on the other side, did you miss your closed ones like parents or wife or children or friends or locations or your possessions? Did you miss any of this or you forgot completely about it?
No, I didn't miss any of it. Um, what I what I felt is that it was a trick or it was a game. You hear this thing about we're in a simulation or we're in a hologram, and none of this, the Matrix, that's what they're telling us, is that none of this is real. It's like a projected movie or a play, and we're all playing these parts, and nobody ever dies. We can't tell that here because we go through these incredible losses that are uh, rip our hearts out. We all have been through it, and but nobody really dies. We're just other souls, part of our group that are playing other parts. It's hard to believe, but once you do get that around your head, then everything lightens up, and life is just joyful. It's a gift.
Yeah, I had one interview with one person that was a friend of mine. This is how I started my channel actually last year. No, and he told this story to a friend of mine. That friend told me, and I said, you know what? Let me interview him because I had a channel in Russian. And we went to the same location, the hospital. He lost consciousness, and he told me this story how he went out of his body, and he was flying over, and he saw this big being from light, made of light, and he experienced the same thing. They said, "No, it's not your time. You're going to come back, and everything is going to be different this time," because his life was bad. He was divorced, and he was all miserable. He didn't want to live. Everything is going to be good, and he went back. And I asked him this question in the interview. It was a live interview. We went to the location. I asked him, I said, did you miss anybody from your family? He said, no, I didn't miss anybody. I said, did you see anybody like your grandmother? He said, I didn't see anybody and I didn't care. Now, everybody in the comments, not everybody, but a lot of people in the comments say, "How come you don't miss your parents? This is crazy. We miss. You should miss your loved ones. This is not good. Why you want to go to heaven if you're not going to see your loved ones?" Then you're saying the same thing. You didn't really care because it's a different, completely different vibration with different kind of values over there.
Yeah, my wife, I was telling the story. My wife never said anything, but years later, she was like, you didn't even want to come back. You didn't even want to come. And I'm like,
She remembered that,
well,
eh?
no. I'm like, well, yeah. I'm like, no, I didn't. What, is that offensive? And she's like, yes, it's offensive. And I'm like, it's not really explainable, but this is a really well done illusion, and it's a play, and we're having a wonderful time. And if you bring the best you got forward, then you don't have to come back and you know do any more plays. Eventually, that's what that movie Groundhog Day is telling us. Uh, Bill Murray is, he's kind of an a-hole there at the beginning. Then each day is a new life. Each morning he wakes up to a song that says, "I got you, babe," which means the soul has us, the human, and we're going to have these experiences, these lessons, until we learn the lesson. And throughout that movie, he becomes a sweeter soul. And then one day he wakes up and he gets to go home. He gets to leave.
He
That's a
awa-
powerful
it's
message.
it is a very powerful message right there in the film. He got awakened.
Right.
Okay, Bill, let me ask you about if you'd like people to contact you or you have a book or something, if you'd like to share that.
Yeah, people find me easy enough. I can give you my email address if you want to include it. And I have this book that was looking pretty good a few years ago, and then all these things started happening, and so I'm trying to include that in this book. I will get it typed up eventually, and I call it Full Contact Kundalini, the greatest story never told. Yeah, that story is everybody's story. We haven't realized it usually.
Thank you for watching About Freedom Show. I really appreciate you. Click on one of the videos below and don't forget to subscribe.